Freedom Blues and American Soul by Knial Piper. Part 1. Freedom Blues. 1864. Some things are just so evil, so sinister, that luck and prayer are never enough. It was the most dangerous thing they had ever encountered. It had been a long many months of murder, insanity, rape, blasphemy, and violence. A blue moon lit the wild flowers in the marshland that night. They decided to end the terror. A dark sky beset the Mississippi Delta. A group of 10 men in dusty overalls and weathered boots marched down a cobble road carrying a burlap bag. One of the men with no teeth held the ties of the bag and pulled it and its contents across the main street cobbles. A trail of blood stained the path. From inside the small bag, a small boy had been haphazardly tied at his wrist and his ankles. He was bound and gagged. A large majority of the townfolk had spent hours beating the 6-year-old boy into unconsciousness. A large welt above his eyes would take days to heal, and another under his ribs was not repairable. The women and children stood at their town porches outside the pharmacy and saloon. Merciless eyes gathered to watch the end. Even several of the slaves had escaped their beds to witness the event. Miss Thatcher held her children near her hip. One of the boys tried to cover his eyes, but Miss Thatcher pushed his hands from his face. He buried his eyes in her dress. The flames above their heads in the town lit the only road. The blue gaze of the moon was nearly unbearable. Everyone in the town felt its glow. Robert E. Lee had just surrendered his forces, and their money was no good any longer. Times were tough, but they were bound to only get worse. The moon had felt overbearing for the past few days. The town's men had met only a few nights earlier and decided what needed to be done. In the town, Eugene, the banker, had offered to capture the boy while he slept in his bedroom. Miss Thatcher had defended the boy for a number of years, but eventually enough was enough. The evidence was more than sufficient to take action, and even Miss Thatcher wanted the boy gone. All was quiet. All had been decided. No words were necessary. Eugene led the pack off the cobble road onto more stubborn ground. As the bag rolled across the grass and dirt, it started to collect a coat of debris. The men walked a few more feet to a tree where they had lynched the slaves. It had been a bit more active of a tree recently, but then again, everything was going wrong recently. The town was amiss. The sheriff was dead, the deputy had lost an arm, and the town church had been burned down. Father Tom was lucky enough to have escaped the fire without as much as a scratch. A rather hefty town member in the back of the pack approached the tree. He placed his right foot on the tree in order to lift his left to its toes and reach for the noose. He yanked hard on the rope. As he did, he looked back at the others to gesture a thumbs up. The toothless man lifted the bag to his chest and dropped the boy and the bag onto a pile of sticks below the noose. He stripped the bag open and rolled the body of the boy onto a pile of logs and twigs. The boy's body was badly damaged, and even though the sticks were only reopening wounds and creating new ones, no one showed any mercy. Not a tear was shed. The man looked the boy over and then back at the group. His shadow blocked out the moon's light. The toothless man and his hefty comrades loosened the knot and lifted the boy's body. Suddenly, the boy's eyes opened, and a look of shock took him. "What are you doing? What's going on?" the boy asked, with sincere concern in his eyes. Father Tom held his hand to his chest and bowed his head to let the men know they were doing the right thing. No one said anything. The heavy-set man held the boy's body as the boy began to squirm about in his grip. 2 men from the pack rushed over to help secure the boy. "What have I done? I promise I'll fix it. What have I done? Please." The boy began to cry and scream and pout. His prepubescent voice was especially annoying. "Daddy, where is my father? He would not let this." The boy began to cry hysterically. His father had not decided to attend. While he knew what needed to happen, he could not bear to see his son tortured, beaten, and burned. It was bad enough that he had learned what his son was, or at least what his son had become. He could not additionally bear participation or the memories that might follow. The boy's cries were cut short as the noose was placed around his neck, and the men quickly dropped the body. A swift and firm crack flew through the air. Even the folks, nearly a half-mile back, could hear the glorious sound. The boy's eyelids fell loose. The men stepped down from the pile of brush and away from the tree as they lit a match and set the pile on fire. His small body swayed back and forth under the glow of the moon. The fire slowly grew from a gentle flame to a violent inferno. The blaze engulfed the adolescent's body. All eyes watched eagerly as the flesh melted and fell from the boy's undeveloped and now blackened muscles. As his eyelids began to droop down past his cheekbones, his gooey eyeballs began to squirm about in his head. The pupils contracted and immediately focused on the leaves above his dangling body. His jaw dropped and a terrible sound vibrated from the thing's throat. A piercing sound drew the entire town's attention. Slipping through the smell of burned flesh and hair, the pitch caused everyone nearby to bend at their knees and clasp their ears with their hands. The sound rang for a few seconds before fading below the unpleasant odor and smoke. The town rose to their feet and looked at each other to confirm they had all experienced the same events. No one knew what to say, so no one said anything. The moon began to dim. Virgil Caine, Chapter 1. The road was especially hot that day, under the Georgia sun. Savannah was 30 miles ahead, and the remaining accomplishments of the past 23 years were at his back. His eyes rested heavy on the coming traffic, while a backpack full of clothes and miscellaneous items rested lightly on his shirtless back. A lonely straggler is all he was now. Once he had been something others were proud of. Now he was something he was proud of. He was happy, he thought. He had nothing to lose. He felt free from troubles with the wind against his face. Thoughts like these kept his mind in good company. The particular stretch of highway felt unusually long. It might have been because the pine trees had disappeared, or it might have been the fact that no driver had been willing to pick his tired legs off the road for the past 5.5 miles. 3 days. That was how long it had taken him to travel this far. 3 days of heat. 3 days of highway. 3 days of a sinking feeling in his gut. A sinking feeling that reminded him of everything he had abandoned. Yet it felt liberating, and so he carried on. He felt a bit regretful that he had not packed an extra pair of shoes, as he knew his were soon to disappear on the surface of the road. The gas and debris had built dark soot on his shoes and cloudy black rings around the bottom of his jeans. He had packed an extra pair of jeans, but the seemingly worn pair he now wore was bound to last until Key West. The St. Louis Cardinals t-shirt he wore around his back belt was graying of dirt and worn of its color, but he had always enjoyed the shirt's casual appearance. He planned to wear this until he arrived at his destination in Key West, Florida, as well. As long as the smell did not become unbearable, he wouldn't worry about impressing others until it was necessary. In Key West, he could switch clothes and find a decent job and place to lay his head for a few months. He might even be able to make money, enough money to pay off his student loans. The American dream, he thought to himself. Once bright-eyed lads had dreamed of having a house and a family. Once a man would work to build a reputable home. Now the American dream was a life free from debt, a life free from many bountiful attempts of businesses and corporations to greedily enslave the youth of a rising generation. Was such a humbling of a generation such a dreadful thing? Thoughts such as these had filled his head for nearly 3 years. They had grown with his nurture and boredom. Some of these thoughts fell flat, but others had become dreams. His blue eyes might have grown a bit too large for his feet, but he only followed his heart. It might have been foolish to get up one morning and leave for southern Florida, but he thought it would be more foolish to look back on a life spent without true excitement. So he took the advice of his elders, who told him to follow his heart. He could only pray it would lead him the right way. There had been plenty of people in his life who told him to stay, a number of great friends and caring family members who threatened to tie him down and insulted him for leaving. He knew they were only looking out for him, but sometimes the soul only knows what's good for its own existence. He couldn't help be a little jealous of a soul who could settle down and care for the path of other souls. He was a free spirit. He reached in his pocket to grab his out-of-date iPhone 4, handed down to him from his mother. He still had service. They hadn't cut him off yet. Even after ignoring their phone calls for 3 days now, his mother and father held on to the hope he would come to his senses and return to school. He turned off the phone and stuffed it into his back pocket. He needed to save the battery until he could find a rest stop or a fast food restaurant to charge it again. From the looks of the endless highway in front of him, his luck of resting soon seemed rather slim. Nearly 30 miles passed, and the road had gone strangely quiet. The heat rising from the surrounding greenery felt oddly uncomfortable. Over the hills in the distance, under the distorted air, sitting on top of the concrete, a small gray figure came into view. The figure cut through the steam, and a gray sports car emerged. A Porsche 913 Spider. The sports car sped furiously down the road and the open strip of highway. Alone on the road, in all its glory, it began to slow down. The sun hit the hood of the car in such a way as to blind him. The car slid to a stop. A light mist of dirt continued past its smooth gray exterior. The darkened window on the passenger side slowly descended into the door, and a lonesome hitchhiker with his backpack rushed to its side. With a firm grip on a hot car door, the boy looked into the car. He was quickly signaled by the motion of a hand protruding from the shadows of the inner car. There was no hesitation as he climbed aboard and fell into the black leather interior. A sigh of relief fell upon him. Before he had a chance to greet his host, the figure in the shadows leaned forward and spoke. Part 2, Chapter 1. "The name is Virgil Kane. Damn good to meet you," the driver said as he extended a long, courteous hand out to his newfound passenger. "Milo Harrison," he responded as he shook the man's hand. His handshake was cold and firm. "I have to say you're quite brave to be out here hitchhiking rides from random strangers. You're lucky I picked you up. You just never know what kind of freaks are out there, eh?" he said as he tilted his head and raised his baby blue eyes to meet a group of blonde hairs that had fallen from his head. "Well, I sure do appreciate it," Milo said as he examined the man carefully. Virgil was an attractive man, maybe 27 years old. High cheekbones, gorgeous smile, bright blue eyes hidden behind eyelids that naturally squinted enough just to leave a smoky fade. He was dressed in a gray pinstripe suit, equipped with diamond cufflinks, shiny black shoes, white pinstripes, and a dashingly red tie. Virgil gazed at Milo as if he had expected another word from him. Neither said anything. Virgil let go of his hand, and after a brief moment smiled at it as he brushed his hair back to the top of his head with a heartwarming smile and laugh. "Well, let's do this. Where are you headed, Milo Harrison?" "Key West, so anywhere south." Milo tried to finish his sentence, but an overly excited Virgil interrupted him. "It's your lucky day, Milo Harrison." He maintained his devilish smile. "I'm headed down south as well. That's where I grew up. I can get you down to Miami. How about that? Then you and I can split ways. I just need to make a few stops along the way. Sound good, Milo Harrison?" He gazed at Milo with the same smoky stare. "Works for me," Milo said hesitantly. He was beginning to find it slightly aggravating that the man continued to use his full name, but there was no reason to complain. The man offered to take him all the way to Miami. This would be perfect. "Damn right," Virgil laughed as he started the engine. "Another 30 hours and we'll be down in Miami. Fasten up. This beast knows how to rock and rumble." Virgil's grin slowly faded to a mere smirk as the engine shook and the whole car settled to a smooth vibration as it hit the asphalt. In less than a few seconds, they were flying down the highway. This has been a small excerpt of Freedom Blues and American Soul. Freedom Blues and American Soul is a fascinating first novel, a millennial's take on Catcher in the Rye, by a 23-year-old writer. Set in Florida, it is a mercilessly disturbing and thought-provoking portrait of 21st century America. A law student, Milo, hitches a ride with Virgil, a mysterious man of questionable origins. As Milo seeks answers to questions of purpose in his life, he meets a manic-depressive movie star, a hopeless one-eyed guitarist, and the most beautiful woman in the world. Milo's trip quickly dives into a hurricane of supernatural woes. Through mansions, ghettos, and a satanic ritual, Milo begins to consider the fate of his own soul. A relentless snapshot of religion and the American dream in an age of debt and greed. Knial Piper takes the reader on a nihilistic ride through the past, present, and future. Freedom Blues and American Soul captures the voices of a generation. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. This has been Knial Piper. For more information about Freedom Blues and American Soul, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All profits from this book will be donated to the Alzheimer's Association. And again, thanks for listening, and read on.